So the yarn painting came out of a period in the 1950s in Mexico that the context is important because this is a period after the Mexican Revolution, after the Cárdenas period, where there had been a lot of interest in Mexico's popular arts, indigenous cultures. I think that many of the famous muralists of Mexico kind of show that interest for Mexico's indigenous peoples, popular cultures, especially Diego Rivera, I think really gleaned from that. And there was a lot of institutional interest in pushing forward also the discipline of anthropology. So you have this generation of Mexican anthropologists that start to travel to different indigenous communities. And one of these people, his name was Alfonso Soto Soria, and the governor of Jalisco really liked Wixárika culture. He was interested in Wixárika culture. He was a writer himself, Agustin Yanez. And he asked this anthropologist to start making these trips to gather objects that are some of the objects that were gathered by earlier non-Mexican researchers like Carl Lumholtz or Howard Zing. And these are objects that are now, in museums in the United States or in Europe. And so Mexico was trying to do a similar thing, right? They were opening their first museum of popular cultures, and they wanted there to be Wixárika objects. And in that process, Soto Soria looked for a way to also have these more kind of easily transportable, hangable items. And so the yarn painting kind of emerges from that. The yarn was brought by the Mexican government. There was also a group of Franciscans, in particular, this one Franciscan priest, Padre Ochoa, Enrique Ochoa, who lived in Zapopan, in the Basilica of Zapopan, and he opened a little space there where those works were exhibited. And so there was kind of this dual force of both the Franciscans, who hadn't ever really penetrated Wixárika territory, and the government that hadn't either, to foment this particular movement of this art form that had traditionally been these sacred offerings, to bring that to the museum space, to bring that to a Mexican nationalist public. And that's really where you have the birth of this particular format and medium. And then in the 1960s, it really starts to develop. There starts to be a market for these paintings in the city of Tepic, Nayarit, which is a very small city on the west coast of Mexico. And it is in the 1960s where you can really say that art medium takes off. And kind of a nice little side story is that the 1968 Olympics that took place in Mexico, famously and infamously, their design for all their very famous designs were based on the yarn painting. And so you'll notice the 68 that has been very emblematic. It's in the format of yarn. And so the architect and the designer of the whole 1968 Olympic aesthetic was another one of those people who was eyeing Wixárika crafts and was interested in that. And Jose Benitez, in fact, and other Wixárika artists were invited to the 68 Games to participate in kind of the cultural activities and dance and play music. And it was after that he really starts to create his own pieces.